In my naivete, I assumed the work at RRD Deliveries in Vermont's Addison County would be easy. Enjoy the ride when dropping off products in the corporate van. Receive a salary. I relocated from Philadelphia following my divorce in search of solitude, with the hope of finally getting down to the book I had been putting off for so long. Instead, I discovered a work with rigid, non-negotiable policies. This is their true nature. It doesn't matter if the customer invites you or not. You should never enter their home. You should leave the package at the end of the house. If the mailbox at the delivery address displays a red flag, get all shipments done before the sun goes down. Take back any shipments that you were unable to deliver to the depot. Make sure you never deliver packages after sunset. Get off the road immediately if you observe a deer carcass lying on the side of the road without its head. No matter how innocuous it seems, you should never accept anything edible or drinkable from a customer. Never touch a child's package if they answer the door alone. Get out of there as soon as possible and notify dispatch of the location. Do not pull over to see what's going on. If you hear a car horn beeping on an empty road, go as fast as you can in your vehicle. At first, I dismissed them as strange regional beliefs or exaggerated reactions to individual cases. I learned my mistake in less than a week. On my third day of work, I was assigned a delivery to a farmhouse located at the end of a twisting dirt road around 20 minutes outside of town. Due to late-season snow, the roadways were quite hazardous. When early March rolled around, based on what I jotted down, the residence belonged to Verna Caldwell, an old lady. I checked the snow for tire marks and footprints as I pulled into the driveway and saw none. Once a magnificent Victorian mansion, the house now bore the marks of neglect, paint flaking off, shingles missing, and windows covered in faded lace drapes. According to the labeling, the container included hefty medical equipment. I walked barefoot across the ankle-deep snow to the front porch, where I rang the doorbell. A minute later, the door creaked open, revealing a small woman with ethereal pale blue eyes and snow-white hair. The woman braved the freezing weather in a worn-out floral outfit. "Mrs. Caldwell?" I asked, gritting my teeth. "I'm bringing you a package." She narrowed her eyes as she studied me and the box I was holding. "Sure enough, my medication. A young man, please bring it inside. The weight is too much for these arthritic bones to bear." The woman appeared quite weak, and the snow was falling harder, so I hesitated, keeping in mind rule number 1. It wouldn't hurt, would it? "Sure," I replied, trailing after her along a dark corridor, reeking of mothballs and hiding something icky sweet beneath stacks of yellowed newspapers. Porcelain figurines and decades' worth of accumulated things were scattered throughout the house's interior, with framed portraits adorning the walls and covering every surface. It was the temperature, though, that really stood out to me. Even though it was snowing outside, the heat inside the house was oppressive. According to what Mrs. Caldwell told me, it was simply beyond this doorway that I could reach the living room. "Please place it next to my chair." I tracked the sound of the cracking floorboards as I walked on them. I peered inside a half-open door as we passed it and stopped dead in my tracks. There was just one lamp in the room, and it was a bedroom. At first glance, I mistook the life-size doll draped in an antique outfit for a mannequin. It lay on the bed. Neither the drooping skin around the jaw nor the delicately combed hair of a balding scalp is shown on the mannequins. On top of the covers was an old man who looked incredibly skinny. He lay motionless. He gazed up at the ceiling with wide eyes. My voice quivered when I addressed Mrs. Caldwell. "Is that guy okay?" Her whitish pupils contracted as she pivoted. "Herbert is doing wonderfully, my dear. Now he's taking a break. Being interrupted bothers him." Inevitably, I inched closer to the entrance. Since my attention was drawn to him, the man had remained still. It seemed like his chest was frozen in place. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I believe you may want medical assistance." Her face became very stern. "He is resting like I mentioned before. This is how he acts at times. Proceed now. Straight ahead is the living room." Clearly, something was amiss. I retreated to the front entrance and dropped the parcel in the hall. It only occurred to me now that I'm not supposed to visit clients' houses. Policy of the company. Let me leave this for you." At that moment, her expression shifted, and the grandma mask came off. "It was foolish of you to peek into that chamber, young man." Her voice had abruptly grown louder and lower in pitch by an octave. Strangers seeing Herbert in this state bothers him. As I fumbled with the doorknob, I found myself at the door. "Apologies for interrupting you. Wishing you a pleasant day, Mrs. Caldwell." Considering her age, she moved rather quickly to put herself in my path and block my path to the door. "Yet you're a relative newcomer. Meeting you in person would be Herbert's dream. These days he hardly ever receives visits." A door creaked behind me. In spite of no one obviously pushing it, I turned around and noticed the bedroom door wide open. After a long struggle, I was able to get the front door open and insist that I really must go. "You are aware of other deliveries." As if on cue, Mrs. Caldwell's hand sprang out and firmly grasped my wrist. "Young dude, please don't be curt. This is just a brief stop. You appear really healthy, but Herbert needs his medication." After releasing my grip on my arm, I staggered backward onto the porch. I sprinted to my van, tripping twice in the snow without turning around. I looked over to the home as I struggled with the keys. Standing in the doorway, Mrs. Caldwell observed me. Appearing from behind her was a towering skeletal figure, a man dressed in an antiquated suit whose movements were clumsy and unnatural. He had an unnatural slant to his head, but he stared at me the whole time. Never in my life have I seen a car start up, but rapidly I caught a final sight of the two people standing motionless in the snow as I backed out of the driveway in my rearview mirror. Upon returning to the depot, I apprised my supervisor of my observations. His response caught me off guard. Just a cautious nod. No surprise, no astonishment. "Row 1, he whispered. "Never set foot in a customer's house, it all makes sense now." Before picking up the phone to make a call that I was barely able to make out, he jotted something down in his ledger. It was revealed to me the next day that the sheriff had discovered the Caldwell house to be vacant during his visit. Not a single old woman, suit-wearing male or piece of furniture. After an old couple passed away in the residence, it has reportedly been deserted for about 10 years. Caldwell, Herbert, and Verna. No one ever found the parcel. I dropped in the corridor. After what happened with Caldwell, I was quite cautious, as you could expect. As much as I tried to follow the rules religiously, I couldn't help but wonder whence they originated. Just why were they being so precise? Although my employer was rather coy, R&R's dispatcher, Mara, who had been there for nearly 15 years, was far more candid. That guideline regarding the warning signs, right? Orrin Peckley was the beginnings of that. She informed me over coffee one morning in 2012 that he was a top driver for us, a veteran who was reliable and friendly with clients. The red flag on the mailbox indicated that Orrin was delivering to a rural address on the outside of town, according to Mara. Encircling a humble home on a sprawling estate of many acres was thick forest. There were rumors that the owner, a reclusive individual who had relocated from California a few years ago and was allegedly involved in cult activities, was rather notorious in the region. The customer had specifically requested that all items be left at the end of the driveway, but Orrin chose to save them a long trek in the storm by delivering one straight to the front door. Exactly what Orrin beheld at that house remains a mystery. He was visibly frightened, and his clothing were wet with what he insisted was simply precipitation when he arrived to the depot hours later than expected. Yet, Mara had her doubts. He abruptly resigned the following day, vacated his flat, and did not provide a forwarding address. Orrin had dropped off the box to Weathers' house, and 3 days later someone complained that the area smelled terrible. The police were called, surrounded by photographs. Weathers lay lifeless in what seemed like a ritual room in his basement. The room was concrete with strange stains on the walls and floors, and contained hundreds of images of people who appeared oblivious to the fact that they were being photographed. There were shots of people at grocery stores, walking dogs, or sitting in cars, and dozens of photos of R&R delivery drivers like Orrin going about their routes from months prior. Though suicide was stated as the official cause of death for Weathers, the responding cop suffered from nightmares for weeks following the incident. A number of them had already left or been transferred to other divisions, and the warning sign that had been Weather's mailbox was now part of R&R's system. At first, I didn't buy Mara's narrative. However, after a month on the job, I arrived at a secluded cabin and noticed a newly painted red flag on the mailbox. I followed protocol, snapped my confirmation photo, and was ready to depart after leaving the package, a large box from a hunting gear company at the end of the lengthy road. Resuming my journey in the vehicle, I became aware of activity along the forest line. A man saw me from a distance with the pines casting a partial shadow. With what seemed like a hunting mask covering his face and what seemed like a powerful gun in his hands, he stood tall in his camouflaged clothing. I quietly got into my vehicle and drove away. Acting as though I hadn't noticed him, I observed him coming out of the forest, taking the parcel, and then standing in the road keeping an eye on my car while I rounded a bend and lost his presence in my rearview mirror. Later, when I told my supervisor about the man, he grimaced and wrote a new entry in his ledger. We did not get a reason for the address's removal from our delivery routes the next day. Also missing was the box that was supposed to be delivered there. However, I never saw it brought back. The local paper informed me 2 weeks later that a man had been apprehended after authorities discovered evidence linking him to 3 hikers who had gone missing a year earlier. The red sign indicated that he resided at that address. During the winter months of December and January, Vermont sunsets can be as early as 4 o'clock. Because of this, the no delivery after dark rule is extremely difficult to enforce, particularly during the Christmas season. When our delivery volume increases threefold, I was usually successful in completing my routes with plenty of time to spare before sunset. A blizzard in the morning had delayed my start on a late December Friday, and an additional hour had been lost due to a broken chain on my snow tire. The sun was setting over the Green Mountains at 3:30, and I had 4 deliveries to go. For directions, I contacted my supervisor. He spoke without hesitating and ordered them returned. One of them is listed as urgent, but we will deliver them tomorrow. As a form of protest, I examined the address on a little package that had been sent to a residence on Route 125. According to a medical supply store, it's just a short drive away. A long sigh followed by a period of quiet on the other end of the line. A cause for the rule's existence is obvious to you, I am aware, but it is almost 3:30. I can reach there before dark if I head directly there. Still no word. Absolutely just one shipment. Just go to the Route 125 address. After that, you'll be right back at the depot. No need to rush the other shipments. Tomorrow will be fine. By the time I hung up, I had already agreed and was directing the vehicle toward Route 125. Several inches of snow blanketed the narrow dirt driveway that led to a modest cabin at the given address, which was set back from the road. At 3:45 p.m. I arrived at the estate. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a deep orange and purple light over the snow-covered terrain. There was still plenty of time to drop off the item and return to the main road. I only needed another 15 minutes of daylight. At first sight, the cottage seemed deserted. There are no cars in the driveway, no smoke coming from the chimney, and no lights. I walked up to the front door, clutching the parcel, and rapped on the door. Received no reaction. It was standard practice to notify the customer when a shipment was undeliverable and return it to the depot so they could either pick it up or reschedule the delivery. Because of the critical nature of the medical supplies label and the house's remote position, I opted to check the side of the building and found what appeared to be a rear door. Despite the chill, I peered over the bend and saw a window half ajar. A faint sound like that of a radio or TV could be made out through it. "Greetings," I yelled out. "R&R Shipping? Lawrence Devereux. I have a parcel for him." All internal noise came to a sudden halt. I perceived motion, a scuffling sound resembling the pull of a large object on the floor. "Your medication supplies are with me, Mr. Devereux." I had to put my ear to the wall to make out a response. The voice was that low. Put it on the doorstep. Some could say the voice sounded weak on the outside. I drew nearer to the window in my anxiety. "Excuse me, but are you okay? Require any assistance?" "No." The abrupt increase in volume startled me. "Thank you. Go ahead and leave the package." I felt nervous because of the urgent haste in his tone. Per your instruction, I stashed the shipment near the rear entrance. Mr. Devereaux, is there someone I can contact on your behalf? There was a brief pause before the shuffling noise returned. I am getting closer. A little break appeared in the back door, allowing darkness to seep through. The other side's identity remained a mystery to me. You must depart immediately. The speaker warned that nightfall is approaching. My eyes darted to the horizon. At that moment, the sun dipped below the mountain range. Absolutely, I intend to attend farewell for the night. A hand sprang out of the crack in the door and snatched the parcel as I turned to depart. The hand appeared to be coated in what appeared to be dark stains, but it was actually rather young and robust. As the goosebumps rose up and down my spine, I sped back to the van. My focus was drawn to something in my periphery as I pried open the door. 3 individuals stood at the property's edge, their silhouettes contrasting with the sky that was growing darker. Their distance made it impossible to discern them, yet something about their proportions felt off. They don't look like casual observers, too tall, too skinny, and too still. The engine was started by me as I hopped inside the van. For an instant, my headlights shone on the cabin's front, illuminating something I had missed earlier. What I first took to be dark wood turned out to be a stain pattern on the front door, a big splatter pattern that extended outward from the handle. It looked like dried blood. Putting the van in reverse, I accelerated out of the driveway. The 3 people were now approaching the cabin in a strangely coordinated fashion. As I could observe in my rearview mirror, Lawrence Devereaux was a topic I brought up the next morning when I spoke with my supervisor. His countenance grew gloomier. How about he? Just before dusk on Friday, I sent him a package. It seemed as if he was sick. With a quiet voice, my supervisor shut the door to the office. Okay, pay close attention. No one named Lawrence Devereaux exists for a long time. That cabin has caused us trouble, various aliases, various justifications for shipment delays, but consistently the same pattern. Prior to sundown, customers have requested delivery times for urgent packages. This is beyond me. Your company has sent 3 drivers to that address before dusk to make deliveries. Out of nowhere, one vanished. The 2 others returned and transformed. They abruptly left and disappeared. However, they made an effort to persuade other drivers to deliver to that particular house before they departed. What did I need the recipient for? Even if I don't know, I am aware of this, Ishika declared. You were fortunate to depart at that time because that address is now on the blacklist. Tragic wildlife casualties dot Vermont's rural highways, particularly during hunting season. It only took 6 months on the job for me to become used to seeing dead squirrels and raccoons. Even deer weren't unusual, but most hunters would carry off their kill instead of leaving it on the road. My initial reaction upon seeing a decapitated deer obstructing the winding dirt road that led to the Bauman property was not to consider rule number 4. The hunter's kill I thought had been partially claimed and then left unclaimed for some reason. Discouraging, albeit not worrisome, the guideline came to mind just as I was about to take a detour. It looked ridiculous after all. Would it have made any difference if the deer had been shot in the head? However, I was unwilling to take any chances following my encounters with the previous regulation. I started searching for a different way to go to the Bauman house after shifting the van into reverse. A longer route, as shown by my GPS, would extend my drive by around 20 minutes. Difficult to handle, though. Something peculiar about the deer carcass caught my eye when I swung the van around something that had gone unnoticed before the road was nearly free of blood. And substantial pool of blood ought to have been produced by a freshly butchered deer, particularly if it had been severed at the head. It appeared as though this one had been draining meticulously before being purposefully positioned in the middle of the road. I veered off the beaten path, making regular checks of my rearview mirror to ensure no one was tailing me. Surrounded by thick trees on 3 sides and a tiny lake on the 4th, the Bauman property was situated in one of the most inaccessible regions along my route. The only way to get there was to take the longer path or the narrow dirt road that I had previously left behind. A woman in her mid-60s, Mrs. Bauman, greeted me upon my arrival. She had the angular features and no-nonsense attitude of someone who had lived a life of seclusion in the countryside. Seeing me made her look astonished. The recipient said, "Oh, you're earlier than expected," as she signed the packet. "It is far later when the majority of drivers succeed. The main route was blocked by a deer carcass, that's right. The circuitous route was not an option for me." Her eyes widened significantly and her face shifted in an instant. "A deer, if fate would have it, losing its skull." Anxiety gripped me as I nodded. "Indeed. How did you learn this?" She looked over toward the forest, and then said softly, "Turning around was the correct choice. Their sign is that what does their sign mean? Who is the signatory?" She responded with an air of complete clarity, naming the Willard family. "They make their home farther into the forest, away from any highways. They have done so for years, and they are hostile toward outsiders and possess well-distinctive methods of delineating their domain." I was horrified by the way she spoke the name Willards, even though I was unfamiliar with the family. "Do you think they're hunters?" In a way, with the parcel clenched in her fist, she began to run for her home. "When it comes to hunting, they are picky. Keep to the main roads, my young guy, and repeat today's actions. If you encounter a similar sign in the future, do not return in any other manner. Instead, turn around. Do not bother with the shipping at all. If the sign is disregarded, what will occur?" I couldn't resist asking. Now that we were halfway inside, she was on the verge of entering. "Go ahead and bring up the subject of the man called Jackson with your supervisor. In 1997, he worked as a driver here. He disregarded the warnings." After that, she slammed the door shut. I did inquire about Jackson with my manager upon my return to the depot. However, his normally reddish-brown skin became pallid. "Did someone inform you about that?" "That was his demand." According to Mrs. Bauman, he was a driver who disregarded a signal from the Willards. A tiny scar on my boss's neck was the object of his touch, an observation I had made previously but had never questioned. Indeed, Jack was a friend of mine in the same year we began our careers at R&R. He had excellent driving skills, but, wow, he was obstinate, considered all the regulations to be merely superstitions held by the elderly. My supervisor said that Jackson ran across a deer on a lonely road, but kept on anyhow. About 3 days after he was supposed to be there, his deserted van was discovered approximately 5 miles away. There was no sign of the package or the keys in the ignition. Only Jackson's R&R cap, splattered with blood and verified by DNA tests, was discovered. According to my supervisor, the official report stated that a bear attack was the cause. Contrary to popular belief, bears do not like deer, drag men from trees and then drain them, never give a bear a trophy. He was unwilling to provide any additional details, but the next morning I discovered a sealed envelope in my locker that contained a single newspaper piece from 1997. It went into detail about his vanishing and the ensuing hunt for him. 3 other members of the search group had also vanished, which my supervisor had neglected to mention. Their tents were found torn and their bodies were arranged in what the story described as a ceremonial display when they were discovered at their campsite 1 week later. They were all completely bereft of brains. Being rude is one of the most difficult commandments to follow. The practice of hospitality is almost sacred in rural Vermont. You may experience feelings of personal affront if you decline an offered cookie or cup of coffee. I wasn't going to take any chances, though, because rule number 5 was quite clear. A courteous, "No thank you, I'm good," was understood by the majority of customers. Nodding slightly as if I had passed some sort of test, some even appeared to anticipate it. However, this specific delivery stood out. In a delightful hamlet outside of Bristol, Mrs. Hargrove resided alone. Her fairly modern greenhouse attached to the south side of her home allowed her to enjoy beautiful flower beds even in the dead of winter. She resembled a picture-perfect storybook grandma in her 70s, petite with rosy cheeks. I made frequent deliveries to her. She frequently shopped online for a wide variety of goods, including books, gardening tools, and exotic cuisines. She always greeted me warmly and offered me herbal tea made from my own garden, along with freshly baked pastries, whenever I arrived. She seemed to take a little pause every time I gently declined, but she always managed to regain her cheery manner. After going through this pattern for a while, I nearly forgot that she was the rare exception among the usually understanding Vermonters. A nor'easter hit in February and dumped 2 feet of snow in a few hours, and then the blizzard hit. The storm had already worsened while I was already out of its path, but most deliveries had been cancelled. Instead of taking the dangerous roads back to the depot, my supervisor radioed in and told me to wait it out somewhere safe. I was fortunate enough to be less than a mile away from Mrs. Hargrove's cottage when I dropped off a box for her in my van. After determining that I could handle the delivery, I politely requested to use her phone to contact my employer for any more instructions. As I stepped out of my icy boots into her warm kitchen, her usual enthusiastic welcome was matched by her warmth. "You really shouldn't venture out in these weather, my friend." As she snatched the parcel out of my hands, she clucked, "You will meet a tragic end. Allow me to brew you a cup of tea to help you relax." She began filling an old copper kettle before I could say no. The kitchen exuded a warm and inviting atmosphere with its aromatic herbs dangling from the ceiling beams and its shelves adorned with jars of dried flowers and leaves, each one elegantly labelled. "Excuse me, Mrs. Hargrove, but would it be possible for me to use your phone? I must consult with the supervisor." "Yes, my darling, it is in the hallway. However, you should take the time to warm up first. I am adamant." She went to retrieve a baking sheet of cookies from the oven and set a mug of fragrant herbal tea, the colour of honey, steaming in front of me. Sugar cookies, plain and simple, with the correct shape and a golden brown hue. While setting 2 on a little dish next to my drink, she revealed her secret recipe, promising that it would warm you thoroughly. The tea smelled so good, yet I was freezing. Was I really still following a rule that was likely based on an odd occurrence from years ago? After months of deliveries in every weather, I figured a cookie and a cup of tea from a kind old lady wouldn't hurt. Halfway to the mug, I noticed something strange in the tea. Small partially dissolved particles glittered like mica at the base of the cup, and the cookies, as lovely as they looked, had an unusual shine, like they had been varnished instead of baked. "Is something amiss, my love?" As she watched me closely, she spoke. She maintained her signature grandmotherly grin, but her intense gaze was laser-like. Their almost impossibly intense, icy blue color stood out against her light complexion, something I had previously overlooked. "No, nothing," I remarked, hastily. "The phone should really be my first port of call. Worried will be my boss." She pointed toward the hallway, despite a fleeting expression that ranged from disappointment to annoyance. Well, obviously it's just through that I got to my feet and made a staged fall, pretending to bump into the table. The cup was knocked over when my arm brushed across it. A spill of tea splattered over the smooth wood. My mouth dropped open as I yelped and fumbled for a napkin. "I will clean it up, so there's no need to fret." You get to decide. I located the handset in the corridor and dialed the depot. I looked at the pictures on the wall as I waited for a response. I initially thought they were family portraits, perhaps Mrs. Hargrove accompanied by a diverse group of men spanning several generations. However, upon closer inspection, I noticed that each individual possessed that identical expressionless face and slightly off-kilter stare. She didn't seem a day older or younger in any of the photos. She looked precisely like she did today. She has maintained the same look for decades at least. A little table with a slightly open drawer was placed next to the phone. Upon closer inspection, I noticed what appeared to be medication containers. I softly slid the drawer open, a bit more consumed with curiosity. Inside, you could find a dozen orange medicine bottles labeled with the names of various males. Thomas Walden was prescribed the most recent one, which was dated barely 3 months ago. I was taken aback by the description on the side of the bottle. Even though I didn't know the name of the prescription, neurological specialists are the only ones authorized to give orders for the continuation of an induced comatose condition. Upon hearing a sound coming from behind me, I pivoted to see Mrs. Hargrove positioned at the far end of the corridor, her eyes fixed on me. Now the facade was completely gone. She wore a chilly, calculated expression.
Find what you're looking for, she questioned, her voice now cold and trembling instead of sharp and clear. As I waited for someone to answer, I fumbled my words and hurriedly shut the door. According to her, nobody will respond as she approached me. The storm knocked down the lines until it goes away. He must remain. The way to the entrance door was blocked by her. It appeared as though the kitchen and rear entrance were in the distance behind her.
I tried to maintain a steady voice and let him know that it was all right. A radio can be found in the vehicle. I can resume working on it now that the snow has stopped falling. There was no truth about it. I had to escape this place even though the storm was still going strong outside. "Oh, come on," she muttered as she inched closer. Having company is something I've been eagerly anticipating, yet driving in this would be dangerous. I caught a glimpse of something emerald and crystalline within the little grinder that she pulled out of her apron pocket, which gave the impression of being filled with peppercorns. "Describe the tea," Mrs. Hargrove inquiring. I retreated until I reached the wall. Her eyes remained agape as her smile reappeared. Nothing but garden-fresh herbs, hand-picked to assist my guests unwind and enjoy their stay. All of them do eventually. I then understood what the pictures on the wall actually were. No relation, just a group of people, reward items. I caught her off guard as I sprinted by her. Her grasp failed to grasp my arm, and her fingernail brushed against my jacket. Into the blinding snow, I bolted into the kitchen and out the back door. Several inches of fresh powder had already settled on the van, which was exactly where I had left it. In order to see through the driver's side window, I lightly wiped it off before climbing in and starting the engine. After a while of spinning in the snow, the tires finally caught. As I began to back away, I noticed Mabel standing in the center of the road, her grip on the pepper grinder evident. Her gaze remained icy and calculated as she raised her other hand in a gesture that almost resembled a wave, strategic preparation. As soon as I returned to the depot the following day, I informed my manager about the mishap. His look was glum but unsurprised as he listened. Uninterrupted, he acknowledged that Mrs. Hargrove had been on our radar for some time, but that there was insufficient proof to take any action. The last 10 years had seen the deaths of 3 of her companions. Accidents are the only determinants of natural causes. The medicine bottles, though Thomas Walden's was somewhat recent. My superior took note. "Okay, I'll have the sheriff know about it. He has spent years attempting to establish evidence against her." Miss Hargrove's cottage was searched by police 1 week after that. They discovered a complex laboratory in her greenhouse where she was growing a variety of plants with psychedelic and sedative effects. They discovered Mr. Walden alive but in a drug-induced catatonic state in a secret dungeon that could only be accessed by a trapdoor in her pantry. He had been absent for more than 3 months, according to further investigations. Attempts at murder, false detention, and kidnapping were among the charges against Mrs. Hargrove. While looking into her disappearance, investigators found connections to 5 other instances involving missing people that went back to the 1980s. In the course of condemnation and subsequent demolition, forensic examination of the cottage's foundation revealed human remains, including broken bones that tested positive for the presence of 7 distinct persons, as a basic safety strategy to avoid items being misdelivered or lost. Rule number 6 appeared to be quite simple. That is, until a delivery shifted my viewpoint completely. A contemporary house on the outskirts of town, the Fletchers kept it in good repair. There were no red flags on the mailbox or suspicious alterations to the house, and nothing about the property raised any red lights. A late-model SUV sits in the driveway of what appears to be a perfectly manicured lawn, a hallmark of the upper middle class. A little parcel addressed to Mrs. Fletcher needed her signature and included a dress. Holding a clipboard, I waited outside the door. After ringing the bell, an 8 or 9-year-old girl with dark hair drawn back into a knee ponytail and serious eyes that were too old for her face emerged when the door finally opened. She said, "Hello," with the utmost grace. looking for some assistance. Without thinking, a smile spread across my face. "Excuse me, but I need to deliver something to Marion Fletcher. Are your parents at home?" In response to my direct query, the girl evaded me.
"I can sign for it," she responded, her hand moving to the clipboard. "Watch for the delivery." Mum said. I suddenly thought of rule number 6. I'm afraid the package cannot be signed for by a minor. How are your folks doing? There was a brief moment when the girl's expression changed. Maybe it's annoying, or it could be something else entirely. My mom is sick and needs to rest, but she did tell me to collect her package when it came. I was hesitant.
The girl didn't appear particularly immature, and the area wasn't exactly rife with danger, but the rules were the rules, and I wasn't willing to risk anything after what had happened in the past. Apologies, but I'll need to return when your mum is free. I can put a note in the mailbox and she can... No, a girl's voice grew abruptly harsh as she cut in. "Please, deliver the package to me immediately. The contents are what Mum needs." I recoiled in surprise at the shift in her tone. "How is Mum doing? Are you concerned that she may require medical assistance?" Once more the girl's face changed, becoming softer and more vulnerable. With a hint of nervousness in her voice, she pleaded. "She relies on it heavily. It is her medication. She's really hurting." I became unsure of myself. It seemed cruel to withhold the medication if it was in the packaging. My eyes darted back to the label. Nothing about it suggested that it had come from a pharmacy or any kind of medical supply company. The sender was an individual, not a business. In what ways does it treat illness? As I deliberated over my next move, I inquired. A little narrowing of the girl's eyes occurred. "Something for her ailment, I'm not sure." "Which condition is it, by the way?" Her expression shifted to one of wrath as she regained her composure. "It is not appropriate for me to discuss it. Submit the package to me immediately, please." Throughout this entire exchange, something seemed off. A demanding, nearly adult-level intensity alternated with the girl's manner as it fluctuated between mature politeness. "As I make my way back to my van, I'll tell you something. She needs to give you permission to leave the box with her, so I'll contact my dispatcher to see if they can get in touch with her mum." "Which way does that go?" Surprisingly strong, the girl's hand sprang out and grabbed my wrist. "No need to contact anyone, I'll take care of it. No one should be aware." Now, when I was really unsettled, I freed my arm. "I'm afraid that's not possible. Tomorrow I will return." The girl yelled after me as I turned to go, but something was strange about her voice. "She's determined to keep you there, you know." "Not after you laid eyes on me." I dove sideways. With a shift in her body language, the girl stood tall in the driveway. Her head cocked at an awkward angle, but she stood up straighter. Her intense stare was unmistakably adult, locking onto me. "To whom are you referring?" I inquired. As I began to retreat toward my vehicle, the child's mother. "She said delightful things are what she gathers. Like her other children, she intends to confine you in the basement." A thudding sound as if something heavy were falling or moving came from within the house. In her smile, the girl showed off her overly large and pointed teeth. She sang, but it was too late. "She is on her way. I couldn't wait to find out who or what's mommy." Hurriedly making my way to my van, I tossed the parcel onto the passenger seat and sped out of the driveway, sending pebbles flying behind my tires. I turned around to see the girl standing there watching me leave. Behind her, a tall, slender figure materialized, its hand gently resting on the girl's shoulder as if she were a parent, a protecting gesture. My supervisor promptly cancelled the sheriff's department's involvement once I informed him about the occurrence. The full extent of the information uncovered in the Fletcher house has never been made public. Marion Fletcher was detained on accusations of endangering a child, and her daughter was placed in protective custody. It was the sole information provided in the official announcement. Officers found a concealed area in the basement with personal belongings of many people who had been reported missing over the past 3 years. Mara informed me unofficially, everyone has worked as a delivery person before, whether it was a postal worker, courier, or someone who brought meals. The cops eventually opened the box I had declined to deliver. Surgical tools and embalming chemicals were among its contents. It was clear that the girl in question was not Marion Fletcher's daughter. The records show that Marion Fletcher did not have any children. Nobody knows who the girl really is. She was institutionalized after adamantly claiming that mother would rescue her and anybody other who had beheld her genuine visage. Being an unannounced roadside help provider is a part of being a rural delivery driver. An out-of-service driver in a rural region with poor cell reception and few nearby homes could be left to wait for hours before anybody comes to their aid. That is, until a delivery van happens by. By the end of my first year on the job, I had stopped many times to assist stranded cars, whether it was by changing their tires, supplying jumper cables, or even just offering to contact a tow truck when I got to a place with better reception. While my supervisor never said anything against it, he did stress that making deliveries on time and without incident was my first priority. This unofficial Good Samaritan principle appears to be contradicted by rule number 7. Nobody wants to turn a blind eye to someone who could genuinely require assistance, right? What risk is there in stopping to help a lost individual honking their horn? It was a wet Tuesday in April when I finally received the response. Even by Vermont standards, the sparsely populated region near the northern boundary of Addison County was eerily quiet when we delivered to the few residences there. Countless miles of thick woodland occasionally punctuated by quaint farms or rustic hunting lodges. There was no cell coverage and the roads were narrow and sometimes in bad shape as they wound through steep terrain that was unsuitable for traditional agricultural development. There were just 2 deliveries left when I heard it, and I was nearing the end of my workday. A vehicle's horn is beeping in a steady beat. After a brief delay, 3 shorter blasts will be emitted. A signal for global emergency. Somewhere up ahead, around a tight bend in the road, was where the sound originated. There might be casualties or worse, but according to protocol, I had to turn around right away. If I turned my back on someone who desperately needed my assistance, how would I ever be able to forgive myself? As I neared the turn, I hesitated, trying to decide what to do. The constant, increasingly loud honking persisted. As I came around the bend, I noticed a blue automobile partially parked on the shoulder, its danger lights flashing in the rain. Still inside, the driver pressed the horn repeatedly. His figure could be made out through the rain-streaked glass. Without turning off my engine or turning off my lights, I drew up behind the automobile. I noticed that the sedan's driver's side door was slightly ajar through my windshield. A feeble hand gestured for me to come closer as it sprung out.
I wanted to run away so badly, but my conscience wouldn't let me. I settled on a middle ground. Instead of going up to the van and touching it, I would yell out the window and offer to phone for aid whenever I got to a place with service. Just enough to let out a yell, I lowered my window. "Do you require my assistance in contacting someone upon my return to town? By the way, are you okay?" A man dangled precariously from the sedan's door as it widened, slamming into the frame.
I couldn't make out the details of his business outfit in the rain, but he appeared to be middle-aged and heavy-set. He favored his left leg more than his right. With a strain in his voice, he returned the call. "I am unable to drive because I fear my leg is fractured. Would you mind assisting me in getting back into my seat so I can summon assistance?" There was an inconsistency in his account. Why, if he was hurt, had he even gotten out of the vehicle? Why wasn't he just dialing for assistance instead of honking if he had a phone? "Regrettably, I am unable to exit my vehicle." I responded, "I will gladly contact someone on your behalf once I return to a location with service, since that is our company policy." A slight shift in the man's weight and a straightening of his shoulders gave the impression that his leg was fine after all. "Are you certain, my friend?" Additionally, his voice had transformed, losing its pained quality and adopting a more aggressive tone. "Be embarrassed if anything happened to your vehicle. It's really lonely out here. Maybe a flat tire, no mobile service, and you're in the middle of nowhere." I felt a shiver that was unrelated to the precipitation. From the distant woods across the road, 2 additional figures Men in black gear emerged and made their way purposefully toward my van. I shifted into reverse gear, prepared to turn around, when I beheld a fourth person standing in the center of the road where no one had been moments earlier. It was barely discernible as a shadowy form in my side mirror. It was directly behind my van. I felt encircled. At this point, the man from the sedan was making his approach. He had removed any appearance of injuries and was holding a shiny metal object like a crowbar or tire iron in his hand. No need to freak out, just exit the van. His voice had become almost friendly. He said, "Your belongings are everything that we desire. You are free to leave this. We rarely moved anything of any worth, but R&R took care of all sorts of deliveries, household goods, clothing, books, and the odd electrical device not worth the danger of an armed robbery. My last delivery of the day came to mind too. It was a little box labeled Estates Items for Appraisal and intended for a jewelry repair business. I needed to decide quickly. Just 10 feet separated the crowbar wielder and my driver's side door. 2 of the forest dwellers were making their way over to the passenger side, while the 4th stayed behind me, preventing me from escaping. But at that very time, I remembered something my boss had said almost in passing while I was in training. There have been some upgrades and safety features included in the vehicle. Even though you might not require them, having them on hand is always a smart idea. When he said standard security, I thought he meant something like an alarm system or a GPS tracker, but now I'm starting to wonder if there's more to it than that. A tiny red button that I had previously seen under the dashboard, partly hidden by the steering column, had always eluded me. It was common practice for vehicles to include red emergency features. Feeling completely helpless, I pushed it. At first, nothing happened. Suddenly, from under the van, a whine of very high pitch rose until it was no longer heard. The man emerged from the trees and froze, his expression one of bewilderment on his face. The man raised the crowbar and proceeded, approached my door after he paused. He no longer bothered with the polite facade and yelled out, "Get out now!" I was too scared to back up just yet, but in my reflection I caught sight of the 4th figure bending over, hands covering his ears, and a distorted face that seemed to be in agony. The same emotion washed over the rest of them, sending the 2 forest dwellers staggering and bewildered, and culminating in the crowbar wielder, who swung violently at my window while letting out a yell of anger and agony. It held, even if the glass fractured. In my pursuit of the razor-thin space between the sedan and the roadside barrier, I engaged, drive, and pounded the pedal. Despite getting stuck in the mud, the van continued to move, making a screeching sound as it scraped past the sedan. The man appeared to be making a full recovery in my mirror. The sonic deterrence that the van had used seemed to be losing its effectiveness fast. The man who had pretended to be the stranded driver was standing up again, gesturing towards me while yelling something I couldn't make out. I returned to the depot at a pace much beyond the posted limit, keeping a close eye out for the man's possible pursuit. Not a single one. It was a struggle to switch off the motor when I eventually pulled into the R&R parking lot. My hands were trembling so terribly. A worried expression spread across my boss's wrinkled face as he waited for me to arrive. He informed her that she had activated the protection system. There was no need to ask. While I attempted to make sense of what had transpired, I simply nodded. There were 4 of them, and they pretended to be helping someone, when in fact they were planning to steal the vehicle. Heavy sighing escaped my supervisor. They were after you, not the vehicle. Am I? For what reason? Reason being they are constantly seeking drivers. I couldn't place the emotion in his voice when he abruptly stopped speaking. Is the rationale behind these regulations ever a mystery to you? Why do we take such much effort in deciding what and where to deliver? Efficiency and customer service aren't the only things that matter. After escorting me into his office, he shut the door behind us. On the desk in front of us, he set a heavy folder that he had taken from a filing cabinet. Upon opening the folder, he mentioned that R&R Delivery have been serving Addison County for 73 years. The contents included yellowed newspaper clippings and yellowed images. During that span, 46 of our drivers have gone missing or died in mysterious circumstances. From vintage panel trucks to more contemporary vans like the one I drove, the photos showcased delivery drivers from different eras dressed in a variety of R&R uniform styles. Officially, most of these disappearances have been linked to accidents, assaults by animals, or being exposed to the elements. We are aware, however, that this region is particularly attractive to a certain species of predator, not limited to humans alone, though we certainly have our fair share of it as well. You mean more than simply humans, right? Uncertain of my want to hear the response, I inquired. For what seemed like an eternity, my supervisor studied me, seemingly debating how much to divulge. Alice, you have done the right thing. You are aware of the consequences when they are damaged. Do you believe that every threat you've faced has been purely natural? The event that occurred today is what is known as a horn trap, he said before I could respond. It's a tried and true method that has stood the test of time, attacking delivery drivers, postal workers, and anyone else who could be traveling alone on those remote roads. A group identifying itself as the collectors sets them up 2 or 3 times a year. But for what reason? What is their desire? Various stuff from various victims. They take some and then let others go. He drew a blank before touching a photo of a young guy wearing an R&R uniform from the 90s. After responding to a distress call similar to the one you described, Calvin Wilson, vanished. A total of 3 pieces, meticulously maintained, were discovered 2 weeks later, dispersed across 3 separate locations. It was really unpleasant. Who about the cops? What little they can do, they do their best with. The collectors are deft. They shift gears, they incorporate new strategies, and they have local contacts to those who choose to turn a blind eye. Therefore, the van's sonar device. Something that discourages behavior. Its frequency is known to induce pain and confusion in people. Though brief, it affords our drivers a window of opportunity to escape. After 2 drivers went missing in a single month, 5 years ago we decided to install them. With this fresh perspective, I considered the other rules. A defense system crafted from years of hard-won experience, with each rule tailored to ward against a different danger, not merely urban legends or superstitions. Rules ensure your survival. After my supervisor closed the folder, he stated they're not perfect. Nothing is perfect. However, he said that these are the finest defenses we have against the dangers lurking in these backroad woods. While he studied my face, he waited.
Is this job still appealing to you now that you know what you know? There was no need for me to stay? Seriously, any rational individual would have. However, I was hesitant to answer because of his tone, which seemed to anticipate my response and reveal something about me that I hadn't noticed before. If I remain, what will happen? Excuse me, I inquired. A faint smile flitted across his face.
If you stick to the regulations and keep delivering packages, you'll be able to instruct the next driver, disseminate your knowledge. What happens if I do go? Gone was the grin. Then you leave, but the collectors will recognize you. They remember everything and they don't let go of grudges when they're denied. Consider this as an aside. I thought about it for half a minute before giving it a single nod. Count me in. He seems unfazed. He has just presented me with a fresh laminated card that is indistinguishable from my first rule card, with the exception of a single addition at its base. Rule No. 8. Listen to your gut. Trust your gut. When you say something isn't right, refrain from having second thoughts. This is where the genuine R&R deliveries begin. While reaching out, he sat. This is where the job starts to become weird. He also wasn't being dramatic. In the 3 years after that fateful day, I came to understand that the initial set of 7 principles served as merely a foundational framework for navigating the peculiar ecology that persisted in this isolated region of Vermont. Strange things have happened to me, including encounters with non-existent individuals and perils for which no delivery manual could have adequately prepared me. As needed, I have disregarded the rules and even made up my own based on what I've learned the hard way. I've encountered unexpected friends and lost co-workers. The delivery of packages to the outlying residences and secret areas of Addison County has persisted throughout. This is the position to fill. A rule follower is preferable than a rule breaker, but someone has to do it.